to use all this. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the June 17th meeting of the General Government Committee. I will be your chair this afternoon. We will have the open session after this closed session, and at that time I will do the acknowledgement of traditional treaty lands and the opening remarks. So, is that okay? That's everything? Yes. Oh, yes.
We just require a motion to go into closed session, and at that point we'll...
Thank you. May I have a motion to move into closed? Regional Councillor Lee, all in favor? Yes, please vote. Thank you, Chris. Okay, we are now in closed session, and it's item 3 on the agenda. We have 3.1, the cybersecurity update. I will ask Deputy CAO Cooper if she would like to make remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So we have Dan Munns with us today. He's our Supervisor of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure, incredibly valuable person to the town of Ajax. He's here to give an update on cybersecurity. And we just thought it would be a good time before summer recess to provide an update to Council on sort of how the cyber landscape has evolved in recent months.
Recess until 1 o'clock. Thank you, everybody. everyone, and welcome to the open session of the June 17th General Governments Committee meeting. I am Lisa Bauer, and I will be your chair this afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting of the General Government Committee is being held in a hybrid meeting format with virtual and in-person participation by members of the public, staff, and council. This meeting is also being live streamed and may be viewed online at ajax.ca/live. A friendly reminder to all participants to please use their microphone at all times for the benefit of those participating in council chambers and joining remotely. The Town of Ajax Land Acknowledgement. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas, more specifically the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations toward truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. So we'll move to item number 4, the adoption of the minutes. We have the regular...
Madam Chair, just missed disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Does anybody have a disclosure of pecuniary interest? I knew they didn't, so I skipped it. Yeah, thank you very much. My mic is on.
I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Oh, you're saying yes to me. Okay. Mayor Collier, please go ahead.
Oh, it's on?
Okay.
I'd like to declare pecuniary interest on item 5.10, CS 2024-11, Ajax Rod and Gun Club License Agreement, as I am a, I'll call it ex officio member of the club, so I will declare interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. So noted. So now we'll move to section 4, the adoption of the minutes. We have the closed meeting session on May the 13th, 2024. May I please have a mover? I see Regional Councillor Crawford. All in favor, please vote. That's it. Thank you. That passes. So section 5, the consent agenda, we have a number of items that are pulled today. 5.1, 5.2, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, 5.9, and 5.10. May I please have a mover? What's up?
Point of order, sorry. 5.9, if I was the only one that pulled that one, we could move on and put that one in the general consent.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. You are not the only one that pulled that item. Thank you. So let's have a mover, please, for the remaining items. Councillor Sterling Lee, all in favor, please vote. Thank you, that passes. Okay, so let's move on. We'll start with 5.1. That was pulled by Councillor Henry. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Quick question through the Chair to the Chief. And this is, if the Town of Ajax required assistance on the 401, wouldn't we require assistance in the border of Ajax as well? And I just want to make sure that's addressed within this.
Through the chair to Councillor Henry. This agreement mainly covers the areas with the 401, but it does include our border on the 401. So if we're heading eastbound between Salem and Lakeridge, a lot of times it's easier for us to get there than Whitby, and vice versa. For westbound calls, Whitby will respond, and then we'll respond as well, and usually turn around at Brock Street.
Excellent, thank you. That was my only question.
Great, thank you very much. Item 5.2 was pulled by Mayor Collier. Oh, let's move 5.1. It's been a while since I chaired. Please forgive me. Regional Councillor Lee can move this item, and let's vote, please. And that's passes. Thank you. Now, Mayor Collier will speak about 5.2. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just looking for a clarification through you to Ms. Valentin on this, and I'll sort of lay the framework. I've been approached by now several development corporations that have existing site plans that are almost ready to go, and inquiring about DC deferrals, and I've been very clear there are no reductions, but different deferrals, whether it's regards to Bill, is it Bill 108 or whatever the bills are that gave some deferrals, and whether it's residential, rental, or condo, or commercial. Is there anything in this municipal development charge we're extending for 10 years, but that limits us from internally deferring? So if somebody wants to build I'll use an example of today. Somebody wants to build a condo development of 5 towers. They're in the pre-sales. They're not getting the pre-sales because the market is not good right now. They want to be able to demonstrate that they are the real deal, and by putting in the foundations and starting the underground work so people can see that this is really happening, but they don't want to pay the $20 million in DCs up front until they get out of the ground, which I'm asking planning staff to allow us. Can we issue a permit for a foundation and then collect the DCs once the full construction begins? Is there anything in this document in front of us that will preclude us from granting that type of exception? We will still get the DCs, but we would just be kind of deferring it till this next phase of construction.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. So not in this report. Through all of the different bills that have come through with development charges, there have been a lot of changes that have happened with regards to freezing of the rates and things based on affordable housing, rentals, various things. But for site plans as well and zoning amendments, there is a point in time that the DCs are frozen for a period. I believe now it's been adjusted to 18 months. Outside of that, no, there will be no other thing.
I just want to make sure that we are not tying our hands on some of these concessions we might need to make to be able to get things to move forward. Thank you. Those are my questions. Happy to move this.
Thank you very much. So Mayor Collier is moving this report. Please, let's vote on it. And it passes. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is 5.4. That was pulled by Councillor Henry. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Through the chair, in this meeting alone, I'm seeing over $2 million in sole source contracts, and the increase from $5,000 to $10,000 for capital expenditure control. I'm understanding through reading the report that this is an updated process and approval limits for staff, an administrative change. Is there at this point, I need to ask this question, is there at this point any way we could deny this change? Through the chair.
Through the chair to Councillor Henry. Well, the procurement bylaw has already gone forward. This is an internal policy that's approved by council that finance staff, along with the corporate, like all the department heads and project managers, this is the mechanism that we follow in reporting on our awards. It's in line with the procurement bylaw that was approved in November.
And through the chair, let me ask this. One concern would be, I've seen a lot of safety mechanisms in place within this report as to how, well, let me word it another way. Could one company have multiple limits of $10,000, procurement limits of $10,000 within our corporation through this change? Could we be giving advantage to any one company?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, we always review any awards that come through. So even the values under $10,000, they are being reviewed by budget contacts and such. So are you, I would say no. I say that the policies that we have in place and the working relationship with the budget contacts and the departments, we do follow the process and the procurement bylaw.
Thank you for that. Happy to move, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about this report? Okay, seeing none, it is moved by Councillor Henry. Please vote. And that passes. Thank you. Moving to item 5.5, we have two people on the speakers list. First, Councillor Henry, followed by Regional Councillor Dyes. Go ahead, Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Through the chair, landscaping and planning was the Town of Ajax consultant. They did the drawings and tender for the construction. How did they get to get the contract for being the consultant? So I guess what I'm looking for was this sole source twice? Who can answer this? Would this go to Mr. Jackson, Director?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, I can respond to that question. So when we would have originally tendered the detailed design, it would have been a competitively bid process. So landscape planning would have been awarded the contract based on that competitive bid. It's fairly common practice that as we move from the design and tendering into contract admin, that the original designer continues on, because it's essentially their drawings and specifications that are being constructed. So they verify, validate the work that's being completed against the drawings and design that they completed. So the important part is they are awarded the contract through a competitive bid process at the beginning.
At the beginning. So this is a follow-through.
That's correct. We have done it in situations where, depending on how we tender the project, that we will sometimes tender the design and the contract admin at the same time at the beginning and award it at the beginning of the project. But for a variety of reasons, sometimes we will wait and award the contract admin. Sometimes we want to make sure that we're happy with the design consultant sort of through the design process, so it gives us a little more leverage to make sure that we're getting what we wanted. And landscape planning is an excellent consultant that we feel comfortable with, and it's their design that we're awarding this contract for.
And does it help to speed up the process at all by doing it this way?
It doesn't really speed up the process because we're awarding it the same time we're awarding the construction. So there's no added step in the process.
Okay, but you're making sure that you get what you want out of it in the end.
Yep, we've built a good relationship. We've worked with this consultant a number of times, and they deliver a good product and provide a good service.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that question. Happy to move when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you. As the chair, I ask that you please wait until I ask for a mover, and then I will pick. Thank you. I feel rushed. So the next person on the speakers list is Regional Councillor Dyes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just before I ask my question, I just wanted to congratulate staff on the report and the work they've done at Exeter Park. I was really pleased to see that you included information that feedback from the public was given and was considered, and you know, alterations were made to the shade structure in the leash-free area. And I think that's really important, that people understand that their voices do count, especially as residents and users of this park. It also stated in the report that it's going to meet the critical needs of the downtown area moving forward, and I think that's important with respect to intensification. And it made me think about security issues. It is a well-used park. It will be used more and more in the future. And I'm wondering if we looked at security like the blue light panic button or something like that through this redevelopment, if it's necessary moving forward, because I think it might be beneficial down the road with all the activity in the downtown core. So through you, Madam Chair, to the appropriate staff, I don't know who can answer that.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes, when we look at sort of the retrofit of parks or the construction of new parks, we do obviously look at the security aspect of the design. We do look at the design of the park from a SEPTED perspective, so I think that's first and foremost. We do look at introducing lighting. If there ever was a need for security cameras, they would typically not form part of an initial design for a park, but there's something that the technology's there that they could be added at a later date, similar to the panic buttons. So although they're not included within the design, if there was a need that we felt we wanted to add that infrastructure at a later date or that asset, we could. What I would suggest is we do have a strong presence of our park security system, so they will be aware as this park is redeveloped, as it's increasing use. We do have a dedicated patrol service within the downtown area that this will be a sort of constant part of the rotation. So we would expect this site to be visited sort of multiple times as that sort of contracted service is in effect. What I would say is we do get also daily reports from our security patrols, and if there is evidence of security issues or criminal activity or what have you in that location, then we can take the appropriate action, but we would rely on our security guards' reports.
Well, I appreciate that because I know we've had some issues in there recently, so I know you'll keep tabs on it, and I trust that if it changes, you'll let us know, but thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding this report? So I have a question and a comment. I believe during the open house, there was talk about having the ability for hookup to cameras at this park if in the future it was deemed that we needed it. Is that right?
There would be the ability where we have power, whether it's typically from a streetlight pole or from a parkway lighting pole, to add infrastructure at a later date. So that possibility would exist, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And my comment is, as I'm sure you already know, Director Meredith, I am so excited and happy and thankful that this park is being completed this year. It is long overdue, in my opinion, and will be very well used and well loved by that community. So thank you very, very much. So may I please have a mover for this report? Councillor Henry. And let's vote on it, please. Great, thank you so much. There are two speakers for the next item, 5.6. The first is Councillor Henry, followed by Mayor Collier. Go ahead, Councillor Henry.
Thank you, through the chair. The first thing I'd like to talk about is to reiterate that staff has taken into consideration the placement of these units with regards to odor for existing residents abutting onto the parks and where these units will be placed. Who could, Mr. Jackson?
I'm just going to refer the details of locations and installation for these features to Andrew Jackson.
We will make every effort to keep the waste receptacles away from the residential as far as possible. They are in-ground containers with a concrete liner, so that will help with any odors compared to above-ground containers, which, as you can imagine, can get pretty bad. But it's a 4-week cycle, so every 4 weeks they'll be picked up. They are in-ground with a very small opening, so we're expecting the odors to be very low, and we'll keep them as far away from residential as we can.
And through the chair, if we're noticing, let's say, complaints about the cycle of pickup for these, is that optional to have closer together cycle of pickup to eliminate that?
Through the chair, yes, the contractor has a unit rate, so it's based on each site, pick up each site, 4 weeks, It's a unit rate. So we could apply that unit rate to a more frequent pickup if so desired.
Oh, excellent. I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you. And I did notice this is another sole source item on the list, and I'm assuming it's because it was the best out there that your team felt to work with in order to get this project done, correct?
Through the chair, we issued an RFI, which is a request for information to the public. It was an open call to whoever had information that they could provide as a proposal to us. We received one. From there, we went to a single source, and that's what this report reflects.
Thank you. Thank you for the information today.
Thank you. Next is Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify on, it says unbudgeted operating costs in the amount of, first of all, I'm happy to see this come forward. This is something I've been pushing ever since I think my first AMO meeting in Ottawa, and saw these in use there and brought them back, and have been kind of bringing it up from time to time ever since. So really glad to see this moving forward now. And I think it's something that's really going to help as we look for different ways to be more efficient in the way we process our waste, and in this case, pet waste. But the unbudgeted operating costs of $49,078, wouldn't we see an equal and offsetting savings in our other collection budgets, for instance, the waterfront, and not having to pick up these big, disgusting, overflowing cans of pet waste and having to pay a disposal fee on it?
Through the chair, I think we'll still have a pickup for all the regular waste receptacles, which might remain very similar to what we have now, when we'll have an additional pickup for the in-ground pet waste. I'm not sure if there would be an offset cost for that. I'd have to defer to other staff.
Well, I guess just to clarify, it's my understanding, could be incorrect, that we have to dispose of the specific pet waste bins separately. It's a contaminated waste, which would have a higher cost. Is that the case currently? Okay, so that would be almost a separate collection and a separate cost that we would no longer have. I'm sure we'll put some, but since the bins aren't explicitly pet waste, it can be included as regular municipal waste.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, currently for a number of years, we don't actually pay for the disposal of our parks waste. It's sort of through the region, through the Miller's waste system, that we dispose of it. So we don't, although we collect, our disposal fees are zero at this point in time.
Okay, that's the clarification. Excuse me, the clarification I was looking for. Thank you, Chair. Oh, happy to move this to the appropriate time if you would like, Chair.
Order. We do have some additional questions. Regional Councillor Crawford, you're next. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As of July 1st, most people can put their dog waste in their green bin. So ideally, I'm assuming that if I'm out walking my dog, I'm bringing this back to put in my green bin so that it can be taken up with the region, correct? I mean, we're hoping that we'll be able to reduce how much garbage that we're collecting in our park systems, correct? Through that process?
Through the
At least
chair,
of that.
that's my understanding, is that there will be a new program put out by the region.
Right, and so the dog waste that we are picking up in our leash-free areas, we're gonna piggyback on the regional, I would assume, on the regional program, is that correct? By taking it up to wherever they're taking it? Is that right?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that the disposal will be with the region, and it'll be similar to what they're providing.
So there won't be any requirement to have compostable dog bags in our current bin, in the poo bins, right? It is what it is. Whatever you get, you get. I mean,
Chair, I would
not
imagine
talking
that is
about the regional, not talking about the regional
Right.
side of it, but our park pickup.
Yes, through the chair, I would imagine that is the case.
Okay. So can I assume then that when these are put into the parks, I'm thrilled that they're at Duffins Creek, personally, absolutely thrilled at either end. That's great. There'll be no other garbage units in these parks, is that correct? Where they Will you be taking out like the regular garbage pails, or are they going to be staying?
Through the chair, we would still have to have the regular units for regular garbage. These are
answer.
just for pet waste.
Good answer. Just asking the question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving along, we have Regional Councillor Lee. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a renewal every year for 4 years based on our satisfaction with the project. Is there an option to extend and expand the program? What if they're doing such a good job that we wanted more parks? Is there wording that allows us to extend, or are we locked in for 4 years before we can make that decision again?
So through the chair, we would re-examine it at the end of each year and decide at that point whether we want to continue with that contract or not. And at the end of the 4 year, we would redo a new RFP process.
But the 4 years only covers the following receptacles. We can't add any, can we? Or is there language that allows us to increase the contract, so to speak, after year one? I think this is going to be a hit. I think this is going to be something that is going to be requested throughout.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee. So the 4 years is strictly the operating side of things. So the other recommendation is with respect to the capital acquisition and installation. So if we were to identify additional parks, say in 2025, 2026, we would do that through our annual budget process. So we can add.
So there's that flexibility to add.
We can add at any time. Ideally, we would do it through the budget process and identify whether it's new parks or existing parks that we wish to add to.
Okay, that's great. Chair, I don't want to move this. Thank you.
Moving on to the next name, Councillor Tyler Morin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very happy to see this come into fruition. I think it was a motion we did earlier this term or last term for this. And as Sterling, Regional Councillor from Ward 2 said, it's going to be a big hit, I believe. Can you briefly speak to the placement of the containers in each dog park? Because I learned something today about the pickup and the maintaining. So we might have residents saying, well, why didn't you put it there? So can you just explain the placement and in the maintenance moving forward?
So through the chair, these containers will be placed in parks, leash-free as well as regular parks, and along perhaps some trails. The placement of them is dependent on the manner of pickup. So we have trucks entering these parks where there are playgrounds, splash pads, trails, where there's interaction with the public. So we have to find those locations, and we're going to work with the supplier and installer on this and staff to find the best location where it's the safest for the public. So we may not have a waste container right outside the gate of the leash-free because it's just too close to the users. They may have to walk a certain distance, but that's for public safety.
Well, thanks
and
for that.
And also for access, because we don't want to destroy our infrastructure. These are heavy trucks.
Yeah, so you don't want to have a truck riding through the grass. So I'm glad you explained that, because I think when they come, they'll say, well, why didn't they put it there or put it there? So that's the explanation. I appreciate that very much. That's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler Morin. Any other questions from anyone? So just one quick one. Thank you so much for this presentation and the report, Mr. Jackson. So if this is successful, which it sounds like we hope and expect that it will it become standard where a pet waste container will be implemented in all the parks?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that when we have a capital project, which was mentioned, we will try to incorporate these into that project.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, no other questions. May I have a mover? I see Councillor Tyler Morin. Please vote. And that passes. Thank you. 5.7 is now on the list, and it is two speakers, Councillor Henry and Mayor Collier. Please go ahead, Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Through the chair. So this motion, the reason that this came about, I believe, was Councillor Bauer, and it was a great motion. It's become very important to the residents of Ward 2. in particular where the placement of this is. So I need to ask at this time, what is the timeline on having these installed in the Imagination parking lot? And will there be cameras installed with them? There's a huge safety concern. I'm getting at least minimum, I'd say 2 calls per week from the immediate residents of this area regarding the placement of these cameras. And they want to know how soon this will be, or sorry, the placement of these lights, and if cameras will be installed with them and how soon this will be done.
Through the chair to Councillor Henry. So the report is really just a feasibility study that looked at, opportunities to introduce solar lighting at specific locations and report back to council, which is what we're doing today. At this point in time, there is no defined timeframe. There is no budget for implementation or installation. So the way the recommendation reads is that if council sort of endorses staff's suggestions within the report, that we would consider the implementation of this report through the 2025 capital budget process.
2025, meaning it will not be done until next year?
Correct. At this point in time, there is no capital budget and there's been no funding allocated to this project.
That's problematic. We have vehicles sitting in that parking lot late at night that do not belong to residents, and we recently had a carjacking in that area. So this is a high priority for my ward, for the residents of that street. Is there a way to speed this up? Is that possible?
The motion just asks for a report, so this just goes through the budget process, right? Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm just asking if there's an amendment or something that can be done. I'm asking if there's a way to speed this up to get it done sooner than later. Through the chair.
Mayor Collier, did you want to respond to that?
This is just to be considered in the 2025 budget, so,
That's correct.
yeah. So it doesn't have money to go ahead any sooner.
So there's no guarantee that it'll, sorry, through the chair to the mayor, there's no guarantee it'll even be in the mayor's budget, correct?
It will form part of the, is this on? Yeah. It will form part of the consideration, and we'll look at everything at the time. I mean, I can't right off the bat see any reason why it wouldn't be, but again, I haven't seen the budget as a whole yet.
Interesting. Okay, those are, and through the report, sorry, is the report's just for the lighting, correct, through the chair? It's not for security features?
It's for solar lighting infrastructure only.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. You were next on the speakers list.
Just, and I have no problem with this. This makes a lot of sense. I've talked about this for a while. I think we should have solar lighting everywhere. I'm wondering, just going forward, is this going to be, and this probably is just a simple yes, installed in all future projects? This is standard practice. Every time we do a park, every time we do a trail.
I would suggest that as we go through each park and trail segment, we would look at each individually. I would not want to say that they would be a standard requirement. They typically are not part of a park or trail standard sort of in all situations. We will look at it from a security and a SEPTED standpoint, and where we feel is needed, we know the solar technology is available, that we would look to use solar as opposed to hardwiring, but I don't want to say that each park and trail segment will necessarily have lighting associated with it.
Okay, let's ask specifically the fairground, the trail system that runs around the perimeter on the south side.
It has lighting.
It has lighting.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Happy to move it at the appropriate time if you want.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Lee, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. So based on the appropriate costs, we'll average out about 30 grand per sets of 3 lights, correct? That's a pretty accurate estimation?
Correct.
Are we able to, I mean, this is just the report that was given based on the motion that was moved. And, staff included some guidelines as to what they were looking for including the lights. Staff would actually be open to kind of any sort of suggestions from council to submit during budget time, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, we'll talk offline then. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? None, thank you. I'm glad to see this come forward. Thank you very much for the report. May I please have a mover for this? Regional Councillor Lee. And let's vote on it. And it passes. Thank you. 5.9 was the next item pulled, and that was pulled first by Councillor Henry, second by Mayor Collier. Go ahead, Councillor Henry. 5.9. Did you withdraw it?
I've withdrawn that question. I answered it. I got my answer in the other meeting.
Oh,
good.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mayor Collier, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification on page 83, where it talks about the approved capital budget of 2.496 million and a 2025 capital budget proposed. And at the time, I couldn't get this laptop to work, so I didn't know. That proposed, is that part of the existing capital budget that we would have seen in the last 2 years? Or is that basically an increase to the approved capital budget that has come on?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, that is the amount that was identified last year in the budget document.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Happy to move it, Chair.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding 5.9? May I please have a mover? Regional Councillor Dyes. Go ahead and vote, please.
Just waiting on one vote, please.
Thank you, and that passes. So the final item is 5.10. Councillor Henry pulled it first. The mayor also pulled it, but I think you had pecuniary interest. Okay. So Councillor Henry, go ahead, 5.10.
I have asked of staff with regards to the renewal of this, because my understanding is this is on TRCA land, and the town of Ajax is doing the renewed lease agreement. So I have asked of staff, as part of the lease renewal agreement, that the tenant provide engineering reports and/or soundproofing to provide greater sound, no greater sound than 80 decibels of sound on the outside of the building. And the reason I ask this, I have no issue with this club operating. I have no worries of security or fear of something going bad or going wrong there. They've been in operation for quite some time and have done so quite responsibly. My concern is with the two developments, I believe, that are coming to that area, residential housing developments, and the sound barrier and how that will affect them. My understanding is there has been no complaints thus far on record, and there wouldn't be because there's nothing around there. It's for the future that I asked this question. If I could have either the clerk or deputy CAO respond to that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Through the chair. Yes, you're correct. We have never received any sort of complaint from any surrounding area about noise or anything else in relation to the club. I can tell you, in meeting with the club, they're extremely conscious of any impacts that they might have on the surrounding community. They talked about things in our meetings like adjusting their hours of operation in order to be a good neighbor to any surrounding areas. One of the reasons actually that they are requiring the security of a lease renewal is because they do have some sound abatement projects planned as part of their capital program, and they just didn't want to make those investments without the security of a longer term lease. So we know that they are pursuing those things. As far as the new development, I imagine any noise considerations would have been considered as part of that development proposal, but just speaking with Mr. Romanowski before the meeting, there really is no reason on the planning side or on the bylaw side to think that the activities of the gun club would be audible at all from the developed area. To your point about decibel readers, I'm going to be honest with you, Councillor Henry, I don't even think we have the equipment to do that type of enforcement. So I'm not sure that that would be an appropriate inclusion in the lease.
I just ask you to take it into consideration. I needed to bring the concern forward for the future residents of the area. So thank you for that. Thank you for hearing me out, and happy to move at appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Regional Councillor Crawford. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say this was Ward 1 not long ago and only became part of Ward 2 in 2018. And to my knowledge, the entire time this organization has been in part of Ajax has never once had a complaint. I realize that there is going to be development happening, but I really see no issue with extending this lease whatsoever. They're good neighbors, and I think we're fortunate to have them still staying in the same location. It's safe, and and so I'm happy to support this.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, could I please have a mover for this report? Councillor Henry? Let's vote. Thank you, and that passes. Okay, let's move to the next item. Item 6, there is discussion. There is none listed for today's meeting. So we'll move to the presentations, and we will start with 7.1, 2023 Financial Statements and Audit Report. Director Valentin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Bauer. We're here to complete the year end for 2023. So we have today with us our auditor, Steve Stewart, who's a partner with Deloitte, who has gone through and audited our financial statements. There's no real formal presentation here, but we are, Steve and myself will be here to answer questions if council has any questions on the financial statements.
Thank you, Director Valentin. Are there any questions? There are no questions. Thank you. Do we have to receive this presentation? Yeah. So could I have a motion, please, to receive the presentation? Regional Councillor Lee, please vote. And that passes. Thank you very much. 7.2 is the Pickering Village Master Plan Concepts and Project Update. And I will ask Director McClarty from Public and Strategic Affairs to take it away. Or Ms. Cruciano.
Actually, I may just make a couple of introductory remarks and then turn it over to Cass and the rest of the team to take you through the presentation this afternoon.
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Director Meredith.
But this project or this initiative really stems from one of the strategic priorities of council during this term, specifically redevelopment opportunities, looking at public-private partnership and the ability to advance the development and establish a long-term vision for Pickering Village. Sort of in addition to it being identified as a strategic priority, it is also referenced in a number of planning documents which have been approved sort of during this term of council, specifically the Recreation and Parks Master Plan, the Library Master Plan, and the Arts and Culture Master Plan all make references to various uses that could or should be facilitated and accommodated within a redevelopment of the Pickering Village complex itself. So we're really moving to the point where we wanted to check in with council on the components, the elements of this particular site and its redevelopment before advancing sort of too far through the process. So this is really a check-in, gauge council's comments as it relates to its future evolution. As you also know, as we look at a public-private partnership, this framework was also provided through the Housing Accelerator Fund, of which the town received a significant amount of money to look at sort of housing opportunities on this site. So that is part and parcel with the redevelopment opportunities that we are speaking of this afternoon. Having said that, I'll turn it over to Cass, and she can lead you through the first part of the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Meredith, and good afternoon, Council, Chair and Council. The purpose of today's presentation is really to provide Council with a substantial update on the work that's been done so far on this project. And you'll see on the presentation that an internal staff committee has been struck with department heads and representation from across the different departments in the town to basically develop the parameters for a request for proposal and manage the project from start to finish. Most recently, in the last month or so, senior management has undergone an exercise to assist with developing the vision for the project, including prioritizing the themes and elements that, as Director Meredith mentioned, have been kind of brought up and woven through the variety of plans and strategic documents that Council's reviewed over the last several years. So the goals for today, and it's a bit of an interesting setup. So we will be seeking feedback from Council. So from each one of you today, I'd like, as we walk through the presentation, for you to take some time to think about what you would like to see as a Council for this project, and that includes what staff need to prioritize, what staff should be including in the request for proposals when we're going through this process, and to provide some feedback on the themes and elements that SMT has already identified. And then the last piece is obviously just providing you that update. So from here, what I'll do is I'll be turning it over to Philip Young from the Planning Department, who will walk us through the process that senior management has gone through so far and provide an update on where staff sit in terms of how we're envisioning this project moving forward on the site in question.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Young.
Good afternoon. My name is Philip Young. I'm the landscape architect for the town from Planning and Development Services. It's my pleasure to present some vision and priorities that SMT identified for the redevelopment for the Pickering Village Arena. On April 24th, we went through a visioning exercise and prioritized community elements for the projects. We start by asking what words come into mind. And we categorized these words into 3 different themes relating to heritage and culture, relating to landmarks and new destination, and relating to purpose and functions. Out of the 8 priorities, the top 4 are recreation infrastructures, connection to the surrounding Pickering Village, parks and outdoor space, and preservation of heritage and elements. Out of the 9 committee elements identified from the themes and concept, the top 5 priorities are senior center, art and culture hubs, multi-purpose space, library, gymnasium. The following slide will expand on how these facility can be included on the site. While the fire hall isn't captured in the top 5, you will notice there's an asterisk beside it. The fire has a report for the relocation of the Wesley Fire Hall to improve the response time. In the next few slides, you will see that we have included the fire hall as an optional facility on the site. The site context. The site is bounded by the north from the Pickering High School on the north, Church Street on the east, and Sherwood Road and the 6 existing residential lots on the south side. And the west side is Linton Avenue and about 10 existing residential lots. The site's area is around 2.43 hectares. Let's look at some of the site consideration based on priority, concept, and facility. The first one is to provide a new community center that cater to older adults. That may be also provide access to other hub services relating to arts and culture programming, libraries, health and service, and daily commercial activities. Second is to provide an art and culture hub to house and to recognize the role of visual and performance art and heritage component of the village, and to allocate potential spaces dedicated to the community partnership for education, health, social, and retail services. Number 3, a new 12,000 square feet of a new library. Number 4, public parking, improve the pedestrian connection to an active transportation to the Pickering Village, because you can see that it's very close to Pickering Village. Preserve heritage elements. There's a Memorial Park gate at the east side over there, and preserving existing vegetation so that to maintain the characteristic of the Pickering Village and provide buffer to the existing resident. Landmark buildings that have a high regards to the architectural detailing, housing, and then a compatible land use and building massing with the existing low dense at the south and at the west. This is my last slide. This is a bubble diagram that shows the possible relationship between the priority concept and facility for the projects. The diagram shows the potential location for the various facility. So those elements overlapping, what that means is that it can be shared, some of the facility can be shared, and sometimes you want to deliberately separate them so that they can serve its own function, but however link it with like pathway, open space. And the ultimate design will be established through the public-private partnership. And I'm going to give it back to Cass. Thank you.
Thank you. In addition to what was provided in terms of the key elements and themes for consideration on the site, staff just really want to provide the additional context here for council to understand where we head from here. So the first piece is that this is a project that staff are looking to undertake from a public-private partnership perspective, which does mean that we do have a private partner, theoretically a developer, at the table with us. And so any outcome of what this project will ultimately become will need to be financially feasible for the developer. So it will need to combine what the town is looking for and with those priorities that we've identified with what can be considered to be feasible for the developer. And that also ties into the below, which is the RFP process, which means that this will ultimately be a negotiation between the town and a private sector. And the outcome of it will be based on those market factors. The last piece to consider here is just that the funding for the to head down this road from a public-private partnership development perspective, understanding the framework, the legal agreements, the financial structure of this agreement is funded by the Housing Accelerator Fund. It is a tangible deliverable that we have to deliver on in order to receive the funding that we have signed on for. And part of the Housing Accelerator Fund, philosophically from the federal government, is that the town is committed to facilitating new housing, and that does require increasing density on publicly owned land. So that's just something that I would like council to consider through this process as we look at what the housing components of this look like, just to remind you that this is all part and parcel of the Housing Accelerator Fund as well. And I'll hand it back to Director Meredith if he has anything further to add. Good, okay. So next steps for staff is to develop and issue a request for proposals, inclusive of the elements and themes identified for the redevelopment project, retaining a consultant that can provide staff with the expertise required to move this project along, and then lastly to provide an update to the council with results on the RFP process, which we are hoping will be soon, but I think we would remove that Q1 2025 if I can. That would be a friendly, that we would not commit to a timeline. It will just be as soon as we have an update on the RFP process, we will provide one. So what I would like to do is if I can turn this over to the chair, and if there are any questions that council or comments that council have, this would be a great opportunity to provide those to staff on the project, on the process. We're really just looking for any guidance or feedback from council on what they'd like to see on the site, what they wouldn't like to see on the site. So this is a really helpful exercise for staff.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So we do have a list here. We'll start with Regional Councillor Crawford. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you still feel it's helpful when we're done. I'm hoping that in whatever part of this development happens as a public-facing part, that we have a historical component put into it to essentially house our archives. So the little room that we have back here, I would love for that to be part of, I hesitate to call it a museum, but an area where, because we're already in a historical area, the Pickering Village, that a component, whether of library or the arts and culture, whatever, has a piece of our history that is accessible to the public to be able to come in and to appreciate where we came from. I think after a number of conversations that I've had with Louise Johnson, it's one of her biggest fears is that we lose, where we're coming from as a town, as we grow and, and develop. I also think I would like to see a floor of municipal parking. There's already not enough parking in the village as it is. It's been a complaint since the day I became a councillor here. And I think that this is an opportunity to be able to address, it's going to be a destination place, and I think this is an opportunity to be able to address that. It's probably the only place in town where you could legit put municipal parking in and it be actually used. So my ultimate utopia dream would be that the village become walking, with the availability of municipal parking, that we wouldn't even need to have cars go down Pickering Village. After seeing Jam this weekend, it was just so incredibly fun to see the village come alive and to be able to realize what that could actually look like as a future. Not every day, obviously, but I feel like when you start to mix the modern with the heritage, I think that's what we have to do eventually. We have to have that kind of mix. We need to bring people to the village in order for the village to see its own reality and its own future, right? Saying that, we have not necessarily you, and I'm saying this all globally, mostly because of Councillor Morin and myself, we've lost credibility when we talk about developing and building. We have a thing on the corner of 599 Kingston Road that is a thing. It's nothing. It could be a car wash. We don't really know. If I'm not tagged once, it's probably every 2 weeks it comes up. And so as much as this excites me, it scares me to death, because I cannot have on kitty corners 2 projects that don't work. So I need to be assured that whatever we're doing here is going to be seen to completion, because you need me to sell this. You need us to sell it. So for whatever steps you're going through in your mini meetings, we need to know what it is, because we're going to be your best sellers on this one. And so it is critical that we know what's happening at every stage of the project. And I understand with HACCP that density has to be included in this and housing has to be included in this. This will be very hard in this community. Not that it isn't hard in every community, and we've seen it happen all over the place, but we need to know what density looks like. What does it mean? What is like, literally, what does it mean? And because again, we're the people that are selling it. We're the ones that, we're selling it or we're wearing it, one of the two. So we need to be able to assure our residents, because there's lots of talk in the village. There's talk about Metrolinx coming in and taking a lane of traffic away. I don't understand how a fire station could even work here without redeveloping the entire intersection. It's like, to me, I can't even see it. I can't visualize it. In fact, it gives me fear of great epic proportions, the whole project. So like I said, as much as this needs to happen, it makes me very excited, because I think there's so much potential here. I have seen things not work. And so I need to be assured that whoever comes in here does it to completion. I cannot emphasize this enough. Done.
Thank you. I think CAO Baker wanted to make a comment, and then, of course, Ms. Cruciano carry on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to address the last part of your comments there. First, I want council to be assured that we share your sensitivities about what may or may not go there. So we were going down a path of visioning and so on, and we want to make you part of the process and part of the discussion, but we absolutely understand the whole credibility issue and the sensitivity of all of the things that will be happening in the village in the next however many years. So, but I want to assure council that this is just the first discussion about really just a visioning of what you might like to see there, what you don't want to see there, just to give us a flavor. But there'll be all kinds of opportunities we will be giving you all kinds of opportunities to be able to see the proposals, to see the visions that come forward and say yay or nay, yes or no, at all different stages.
In any other site planning, we are not allowed under Bill 109 to have any say in anything that happens. So are you telling me this is different than that? Because again, I don't know how many times I gotta say it. I need to know. We need to know. Rob and I need to know. And like, we can't be left out of this. We just can't. I don't care what Bill 109 says.
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't have a legal opinion on this, and again, we're at the very early stages of talking, and hopefully Jeff will nod behind me saying this is okay. But what I would like to see is the difference between putting out a request for proposals and a tender is when you put out a tender, you say this is exactly what we want. X number of stories we want, the library to go here, this to go here, the gym to be here, it has to be this many square feet, all of that stuff. We don't want to do that. We want to put out a request for proposals for a partner to come in and give us a vision. And we want to say to them, this is our list of things that we would like our community to have there that you've seen on here. But we want you to show us what your vision could be for this site, because we're very excited about this site. It's very important to us. Can you fit some of them? Can you fit all of them based on what the cost benefit would be for that particular developer? So we were just talking before the meeting, actually. What I would like to see is when those visions come forward, that we're able to somehow show them to council to give you an idea, a flavor of what's actually come to us. He's nodding. So that sounds like that.
I will hold you to that.
I'll hold him to it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on the list is Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I have the benefit of, living and working in Ward 2, where the last kind of municipal project was ARC Phase 2, so I have a very different opinion in that, it's the crown jewel of Ajax, as far as I'm concerned. So, something along those lines would be great. My question is more regarding this P3. I don't think we've ever done a P3 to this scale before, and correct me if I'm wrong. So can we speak on that? Like, how do we get to this conclusion that we want to do a P3 versus going it ourselves?
So through the chair, specifically, I'll let Director Meredith speak on how we got to the P3, but previously, the Pat Bailey Square example is a bit of a scaled back version, but it is an example of a community asset that was built by a private developer, and there are agreements and engagements between the town and the developer for use of that space. We own part of it, we lease part of it, so there are elements of that are already a private-public partnership, and they are growing to be more commonplace. Traditionally, they are things like hospitals, wastewater treatment, transit facilities, but it is becoming a little bit more commonplace in medium, large-sized municipalities. Ottawa, for example, I think has 3 fairly major recreational complex. Lansdowne Place is one of them, the Shingman Performing Arts Center. These are examples of where public-private partnerships have worked in other municipalities to provide that community benefit with private funding that can ultimately allow the municipality to kind of drive the bus, so to speak, on how we get to where we'd like to go. But in terms of the genesis of the P3 process, I'll hand this over to Director Meredith from the original Recs and Park Master Plan, perhaps.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, I think Cassie did a good job explaining it. I don't have much to add. Our most recent experiences with Pat Bailey Square, where obviously we do have a private development with the community benefit being the square itself and sort of the lease arrangements for actual space within the building itself. So that's a bit of a template. This would be at a bit of a larger scale than obviously what Pat Bailey Square is, but it provides the framework in terms of how we would see moving forward.
Last term, speaking of Pat Bailey though, was this connected to the deferred development charges? And that was, something that caught last term's council by surprise a bit of, we ended up having to pay for a lot of the things that were supposed to be a partnership. It's separate? Okay, sorry. Don't worry about that question then.
Thank
The
you.
mayor answered that.
CAO Baker wanted to comment as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just the one comment that I wanted to make was that we understand that this is a very important project, very sensitive project, and it's something that is really beyond the expertise that we have here, and we need to seek a consultant to help manage us through us or to show us the path forward, and that's something that we have discussed as well. So we absolutely understand that this is something that we don't have a lot of experience in, and we need some help.
Okay. Before I get into my personal wish list, the library was scheduled at 12,000 square feet. I'm assuming those factor in some sort of projections. I'm sure, I don't think the Cleo Vaisler is here, but those library sizes are based on projection and population, correct? Is the 12,000 square feet based on current projection or future?
Through the chair, I believe, I won't speak for the Cleo, I believe it's based on future projections.
Okay.
But
Shane looked up. Did you want to speak? Oh, great. Melissa's here.
Hello, thank you, through the chair. Yes, so that's 12,000 square feet. That comes out of industry best practice, where you have 0.6 square feet based on your residency. And so this was in our strategic master plan, and that was one of our items of number 33, that it's recommended for the Pickering Village, should it come to fruition, to have that 12,000 square foot branch.
So that number would accurately reflect the future growth that Ajax is supposed to see with all this intensification, correct?
Yeah, so overall, it did project throughout our plan our space needs assessment, and then it was updated in our strategic master plan. We will still be short with 12,000 square feet. However, understanding, building projects and things along that was the recommended for this specific site. And then it did identify other areas that could have growth, but then also still future growth as well.
Okay, that's helpful. Back to Ms. Cruciano, back to the P3. I know it's in its infancy, so are we able to, not demand, but partner with ideas like, geared to rent housing, affordable housing targets? Is that more within our purview, since it's a full partnership as opposed to, what we have now?
through the chair to Councillor Lee, that's a great point to share today with staff. Understanding that is, if it is a priority of council, is something that's very important for staff to understand moving forward. I will caution that the ultimate product will be market driven. So just something for council to keep in mind, that the larger the number of affordable units, perhaps the less appealing the whole concept is to a developer. So without presupposing the process, staff between us and the consultant that we retain with council support will need to kind of bridge that and work through that negotiation to ensure that, you know, we get the intent of what council is seeking versus what the developer can reasonably provide us. And understanding that balance is going to be what a big part of our path forward is. But if council today shares with us, as many of us suspected would be the case, that affordable units being a part of the project, as we committed to through the HAF, that a portion of them would be already. But understanding that that is a priority of council for this development is important for us to take back.
Okay. You know, Councillor Crawford referenced, you know, our history, and I've made this point throughout my terms on council of, you know, I think our history goes beyond a single battle. I think our history goes beyond World War II. We have tons of history and, you know, modern history, so to speak, of, you know, different people who are contributing to the very fabric of what Ajax is or what it could be. So I think we've done a lot as a town to acknowledge our World War II roots, DIL, you know, every street name, etc., that I would hope that we take some time to recognize some more modern history and other contributions of people who were not necessarily part of the World War II struggle. So that's part of my wish list. And then I think Ajax is very much in need of some sort of performance space. Like, we have the St. Francis Center, which it's quite limited in spacing. I think we need to create a tourist attraction, and I don't know how we do that. And, our economic development team, along with yourself, will be part of that. But I think, this is our next build for the next, foreseeable future that we have some say over. And I think it's really important to make Ajax a destination. And this building will be a key part of that, whether it's restaurants, we need an identity, and I guess that's what this conversation is about, but it goes beyond just, library, this. I would very much like a destination. And if it's in the village, I would prefer Ward 2, but if it's in the village, so be it. We need to put Ajax on the map, and I don't know how we do that, but my feedback is let's give people a destination to come across the GTA towards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Tyler Moore, and you're next. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like to keep things moving at these meetings, but I think it's very important that the residents from Ward 1 hear that I completely agree with what Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford said, and I echo her concerns, but I won't be repeating them because you can listen to what she just said. With that said, I'm extremely grateful and happy that CAO Baker and Director Romanovsky have said on the record that we'll be part of the conversation. And I think if we keep it under the umbrella of a conversation, that's something we can have conversations with our residents, come back and continue it. That's extremely important and much appreciated, because I know the environment now, council is neutered, if you will. I don't know if that's the correct term. I have a question in regards to the financially feasible for the developer, which I get. That statement doesn't necessarily make me feel completely comfortable, but you also said that you're currently, and I understand there's sensitivity and privacy, and speaking with some developers or a developer, that would be, you're not?
No, not at this point.
I thought there was somebody at the table.
No, not at this point. There's no developer.
So my question is, could we push that limit to 100% where a developer would cover a library and a seniors club and health services and a fire hall, or is that unrealistic? Because if it's truly a private-public partnership, how far in do you think what's the wish list internally? Could we get them to cover 90% of the cost? Or is it kind of a hypothetical question for further? Okay.
It's somewhat hypothetical, but I would say from a development perspective, there would be a relationship between the density, the number of units, and the amount of community space we could expect.
Okay.
So if you're willing to endorse or support a concept that yields X number of units that may allow for a certain investment in community facilities, I think there's a direct relationship between units and investment.
Duly noted. Thank you for that. An underground parking was, I believe, mentioned, or maybe not, but within the buildings, something definitely I think is extremely important. A 12,000 square foot library has come up a lot in this report and in a lot of the conversations. How big, does anybody know how big the current library is, just from my own perspective? Like, is it the one here?
I'll defer that to Ms. Redden, who
I'll
is
take an ish number.
heading back up here.
Is that twice the size of the current one, or?
Got the figures here through the chair. So our main branch is 33,000 square feet. McLean is 6,500.
Okay, that's good. Yep, that brings me perspective. Thank you so much. This is a massive conversation, and one that's going to be scary and exciting, and I look forward to taking part in it and speaking with our residents and expressing their wills and aspirations as well. So I'll leave it at that for now, because this is much, much bigger. But thank you for the report, and I am glad and cautious that things are moving forward. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Next is Mayor Collier. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm glad to see this coming forward. I go back a little bit here. I remember taking skating lessons at the Village Arena when I was probably 7, and it was old then. It's been beyond its useful life for quite some time, and we've incurred a lot of costs trying to keep that. I can't remember how many times that chiller's been replaced and how many times things have come forward in my time here on council, but it's time we do something with that site. I've been pushing for it since I was a Ward 1 councillor there since 2003, so this is timely. I think the P3 we don't have any other choice but to go this route. I mean, things are so expensive now. And what I don't want to see is another Central Park. I'm very happy that this would allow us to retain ownership of the land, which is, I think, very, very important. And we've learned from that. But being a P3, this is going to have some sort of residential component. It has to. I'm just wondering the current zoning on the property and what is currently allowed there from height and density.
Through the chair to the mayor, I believe it's currently an institutional open space type zone there. I could defer to one of the planners to speak more eloquently about the exact use, but I think maximum heights right now are somewhere in the neighborhood of about six-ish stories, which would be probably the lower end of a height in this area if the site's being looked at in a fulsome way. Might be having to look at a little bit higher buildings there, and especially in a P3 type of model. I know we're going through our comprehensive zoning bylaw, and you're going to hear about that next. So maybe there's opportunities there if there's any adjustments through that to modify the zoning here. Possibly, we could take that into consideration. But if there are any amendments, we'll have to size those up as we see what a proposal looks like and what different elements are going to be as part of the ultimate design.
Okay, and that's kind of where I was going with this. Knowing what came out of the Recreation Master Plan and knowing what we want kind of to see here, we should be putting those zoning permissions in place as part of our ongoing review, which I know is happening starting into this year, I think. So I'm hoping we're going to be proactive with that. I also think we need to realistically manage expectations of people in order to get interest on a P3. Ms. Cruciano, you said first quarter of 2025 till we hear something back, and you said let's remove that. I was going to say if it takes longer than that, I'm not going to be happy. I would like to see it before then.
Through the chair to the mayor, the intention is to, after this meeting and retain the consultant, that we would be developing the RFP to put on the street. I think from staff's perspective, we wanted to avoid setting expectations. We may receive back a plethora of really high quality proposals. We may receive back nothing. At that point, either way, I think an update to council on what that looks like will be important, but time is certainly of the essence. The Housing Accelerator Fund money does expire, and we do have to show meaningful progress. So staff appreciate the time sensitivities here to ensure the project is moving.
Okay, I think we also need to be looking at naming rights and our naming rights policy.
Through the chair, this would be an asset that would be eligible under naming rights, yes.
Okay. I'll just speak to, I guess, my wish list. A couple of things that have, I have zero interest in a fire station. I think that will complicate this project to no end. I took out of the budget I don't remember what it was cost, but the review of locations. So that is not my own personal opinion, something I even want to see here, but I think this needs to be heavily focused on community building, seniors, a lot of specific user groups like it's no longer Anti-Black Racism Task Force, but Anti-Racism Task Force. Some of the things we've heard from these groups are they need actual home-based locations, not just a temporary location, but somewhere kind of to do their business and whatever. I think having rooms like that would be important. We heard municipal parking. I would like some consideration to some sort of municipal parking garage separate from the building if there's enough room, because we do have a major, in my 21 years representing the village in one way or another, parking has always been an issue. I absolutely agree with Councillor Crawford. If we could close Old Kingston Road and have municipal parking there would really be an asset, both just to deal with the existing parking, but also to get some of those redevelopments in the village happening that haven't happened in my time here, because it's always about parking. So I also want to follow up on Councillor Lee's performing arts. I was one of the founding directors of the Durham West Arts Centre when it was located at a 72B Old Kingston Road. We always looked at the village as a place. I know they had a performing arts center as part of the Pickering downtown redevelopment, and I don't know where that is now, but I know they have a commitment from the Oshawa Philharmonic. And I always sort of eyeballed Pickering Village as a perfect location for that type of thing. And if we could incorporate something like that into this building, I think there's a market for it, and I think they're looking for a location. So, those are my notes. Oh, to the library, again, I need to see justification. I would like to look at, and this is a separate conversation, but libraries in their current, what people think of as books, what I think of, I mean, I don't see them looking as digital, right? And do you need to have the brick and mortar, or is it should be looking more digital? I would like to see more looking into that type of thing. I would need to see that analysis before I could agree, but a library may or may not be. And I think that's everything I had in here. We've talked about potential different types of housing, potential affordability, maybe working with the region and seeing if there are some things that we can do there. So I'm looking forward to when I'm not the chair.
I know. Through the chair to Mayor Collier, just thinking about the zoning question, if even at a minimum, if once we go through this process and bring a design forward, possibly that's accompanied by like a staff initiated amendment process or something like that. So I'm just adding that to the matrix of different avenues.
Yeah, we'll need to make it attractive for investors. Okay, well, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm looking forward to when this comes back. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Henry. Go ahead, please. No.
I think you got me instead.
Yep.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. So a lot of good ideas here, and I believe strength in numbers. So I'd like to reiterate everything that Regional Councillor Crawford said. I don't think this is the place for a fire station, but I'm not fire, so I'd be interested to hear if they've signed off on this location or not, especially abutting other schools. And I believe, isn't that street a single lane, north and south? That brings up a lot of questions for me with regards to traffic, being able to get out in time, exits, bells going off to residents, bells going off to potential residents that we're going to put there, bells going off during school, all kinds of noise factors there. I personally don't think that's the correct location for it. With regards to something the mayor mentioned with the Arts Council, Durham West Arts Center, upon coming on board in 2022, Gary Strange reached out to me from the Arts Council and said that he had had a conversation with Mayor Collier prior about that location. And I know that that's a location that was mentioned, and for whatever reason at the time, they were looking to the GO station. But I think this conversation is worth having with them again. I know that many of council members support the arts, and that would be a great location for that. I'd also like to put out a proposal, explore the possibility of and excuse me if I'm not saying it right, because I'm not an art student, as my daughter is, kiln. Is that correct? Firing pot? Mm-hmm. So apparently there's limited places where this can happen within Durham region, and for Durham College, it could be advantageous, as well as for the schools, the high schools within Durham. There could be some type of fee per use. There could be a way to recoup some cost there for that. Something that's been mentioned by many of the different art shows that I've gone to recently for high school students, as well as at a college or university level. Seniors, 100%, that area is the perfect area to incorporate even perhaps some senior living above whatever we're building. I do have some concerns with a P3 model and what that looks like with partnership and who would be partnershiping, who that partnership would go to, with regards to an established developer that, and I'm not talking someone that just comes before us, gets land uses, gets all the zoning, and then turns around and sells it. I'm talking about someone that will, much like Councillor Crawford said, start with us and finish it and take this project to fruition. That is a huge concern, especially with what we're seeing, as she rightfully pointed out, at the other corner. So I'd like some assurances there, because we are the best sellers of what's going to happen here. With regards to the neighborhood and having proper consultation with the existing residents of the neighborhood, I'm really hoping that we're putting a wide spread out communication piece to get residents that already live there to come and have an opportunity to speak to what they'd like to see in their neighborhood. And parking is a must, in my opinion. We must provide additional parking so that we can help the village prosper. It might not ever grow beyond what it is, but it will help it to prosper if we can look forward to have that public parking piece there to accommodate for JamFest and other wonderful potential new events in the future, even the Christmas event itself. Those are all things that I would personally like to see in that area. Consultation is going to be a big piece on this. With regards to height, I don't think the village residents in the existing village piece are going to want to see a monstrosity there. So what that height looks like, what was the not 60 stories, Mayor Collier, not 60 stories. Absolutely not. For those folks who can't hear that at home, that was a behind the scene comment, and no. What is the zoning for that?
For that, I'll share with I'll defer to Director Romanowski. I believe he said it was institutional with a height of 6 stories currently.
Six stories?
The zoning's IB, institutional B, so it allows for, schools, community centers, those types of institutional uses. I think the height's dictated in the official plan currently. And like I said, without it in front of me, it's around six-ish stories currently.
6-ish.
So, Councillor Henry, I'll just interrupt. I think COO Baker had a comment. I don't know if you missed the opportunity. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to address all of the comments about the fire hall, but I can wait until you're finished.
Thank you. So we'll do that.
Okay. So 6-ish stories, I could see it going higher, but my concern would be how high and not to blow this up. That's what not to biggie size this too big is what I'm saying, right? And keep in with the existing neighborhood. Obviously, it's going to be a change. Obviously, it's going to be bigger than what folks are used to, 100%. But it's going to be a good change if we do it right. And I think that's where I would say to you the same thing that Councillor Crawford said to you, is keep us in the loop as much as possible, because we're the ones that are going to get the feedback from the residents if this goes south, particularly the two of them, but the rest of us could have some backsplash on it as well. So we'd like to be your biggest advocacy for this, but we'd also like to be along on the trail while this is being done. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll ask COO Baker to make his comments then, and then Ms. Cresciano, if you did have any response to that. Go ahead, COO Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just in relation to the fire hall, we're talking about this particular project here today, but as you know, we have a number of competing issues across the community, across the town. One of them is, as was identified in the fire master plan, the location of the Westney Station, and the problem with the traffic and the ability of the trucks to be able to get out of that particular station. And the fire master plan recommended that we look at other opportunities to be able to move it. So yes, the mayor is correct. The fire master plan, there was a recommendation for a whole fire station location study, which that's not what we were looking at, but what we did talk about was, as part of this project, is there an opportunity is this site a feasible geographical site for a fire station? And which would start the discussion. We hired a consultant to look at it, and they said, yes, it is a feasible geographical site for that, but it doesn't have to be that site. And so when SMT was looking at it, it was not one of our top priorities, but we know that it's something that needs to be resolved at some point. So if it's not here, it's going to have to be resolved somewhere. I will tell you, though, through that process and looking at different options for the fire hall, there are a number of municipalities now that are putting them on a ground floor of a condo building. Like, there's all kinds of fancy designs that are out there. So I know at first thought, you know, you're picturing how this might work, but municipalities are coming up with very unique and creative ideas to manage the issues that they have to manage. But yes, that's the only reason why that this was even considered at this particular time.
Thank you. Ms. Cruciano, did you have any responses?
No, just to thank, through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Henry and to the other councillors that have spoken so far. I know there's a couple more still to go. But hearing a lot of common themes emerging here, which is really great for staff to hear you all. And I think the overarching message that I think from staff's perspective that I'd like to share is that you will be involved throughout this process, and we are a very long ways away from the very specific components of each of the rooms of the spaces and what those spaces look like. So there will be ample opportunity to share that with you all as we go through this process, but there are a lot of great ideas, and I think part of the benefit of looking to partner with the private sector is they may come back with some of the same ideas, but also some completely different ideas that maybe we haven't thought about here today. So just to thank you all and looking forward to the further feedback.
Great, thank you so much. Regional Councillor Dyes, you're next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're right, there are some consistent themes in here, and I'm hoping that you go back and look at the work that has been done in the past by previous councils on this property, because there was a recognition of its uniqueness, of course, its heritage uniqueness and its architecture, and also of the fact that it was a creative hub in the community for artists, and always has been, and that was given consideration moving forward, that those things should continue, but also recognize that if the village was to grow, where you had the wonderful shops and dinner restaurants that you're talking about, then you need residential to support that. And so intensification would go on that side. At that time, they were looking at townhouses kind of thing. So it's really important that we provide that increase in residential in that area to support the village to see and get what, you know, the public wants to see in that village, which would attract more tourism. So it's a really important project. We own the land. So I would hope that we have some pull in the direction we want to go. The other issue which came up was the Durham West Arts Center. Well, they've been looking for a place to live for 25 years. And I was very much part of that in the very beginning. And they're looking at a 1,000-seat theater. Now Markham is 550, I believe, around that roughly, which is huge. I think it's unmanageable. It was decided, you know, many years ago, it's a huge cost operating something because the downtime is basically 97%. You only use it in the evening performances mostly. So that's something you really need to look at and understand if you're going down that road. But I think what was discussed in the past, what I always thought was a great idea as well, was incorporating the arts in that we had teaching space. Whitby has great programming for teaching, artists teaching other artists how to do specific things, and that can be something that can generate some income, either privately or through town programming. So there's lots that can happen. It's an exciting project, and I think the mix will work. And so just wanted to make sure you look at that information from the past, and we'd be happy to to speak to you about the other discussions that came forward at that time. But my only concern is that the P3s I have problems with. They don't always have a good reputation. I think, you know, I think that you have to do, well, the town has to do its due diligence when we get somebody coming forward, a developer who wants to develop on these lands, that you look into their financial background, and you also look into their reputation as to what they've done, what their criteria is, where they've been previously, what they built previously, and how these things have worked out. Because things are changing in the development industry very rapidly, and I think we have to be very, very careful. So that would be my only request. Thank you.
Thank you. Great comments by everybody. Thank you so much for this presentation. The only comment I would make is I wished I had seen your presentation prior to today, so I would have had a little more time to prepare, but thank you. And then I guess, I appreciate everyone's comments. I especially take to heart the Ward 1 Council comments because they are definitely the experts in that area. So thank you for that. And your passion is completely evident and very impressive. So how much money did we receive again for half?
Through the chair, I believe it was just about 22 million, 21.9 million.
Okay. And that just for this project?
No, that
Or
would be for all
everything?
of the projects, yeah.
Okay. Are we at that stage that there's allocation for this project of that money?
So what we've set aside, through you, Madam Chair, is there was about $100,000 that was set aside to do some kind of conceptual, work. There's also $3 million that council approved from the HAF funding to be used on the development of the framework itself. So that's all of the legal costs, the financials, the early engagement, this kind of getting the project fully baked and off the ground and in the hands of whoever is going to be the selected proponent. So that's money that has preemptively been set aside for the HAF. The balance of the HAF funding that we have not allocated, whether that's to a variety of different projects, the planning projects that we're required to do or things like that, that funding we have not identified what we'd look to do with that. I think the last council report indicated it was about $10.9 million or so that we hadn't determined what that money would be spent on. But it can be spent on a variety of different priorities that support housing.
Okay. So then does it work that would sort of be the town of Ajax contribution to this site? And then the partnership is who we're looking for to fund the rest of it?
Through the chair, it really will depend on what the structure looks like. So we may end up in a world where the developer says, nope, you guys, we will give you X, Y, Z from your priorities, and we just need X number of stories to make that feasible for us. So we'll come together and we'll build it for you. They'll make what they need to make, and then we will operate the spaces. That's a perfect world. There may be a different version of that where the town needs to come to the table with a set amount of money. If there's something that the developer can't build themselves where, within a height that is reasonable for the town, then we may need to come to the table with further funds. Those, depending on, through different financial policies, they may be debentured, they may be half funded, they may be from the reserves. There's a variety of ways that that this can be structured financially when we get there.
Great. Okay, thank you. So, and we did talk about intensification, and there was comments about this would be priority, seniors priority, possibly. So if we did have seniors residents in that, whatever the building ends up becoming, then I think this would be a great opportunity to also build in a PACE program. So the program for all-inclusive care for the elderly, which our council has very strongly encouraged and supported and endorsed. So I think there's lots of space to be able to create all of the other elements and themes that my council colleagues have talked about, but also have a really nice centralized hub for those seniors that would be living in the building. That's my comments for now. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes up and what's going to come out of this. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And it will be interesting about this private partnership, and the naming rights process too will be very interesting. Will we have say in that, in naming rights?
Through the naming rights policy indicates that any naming rights agreement comes before council for ultimate approval.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Cass. Are there any other comments or questions before we close off this part of the discussion, presentation? And may I have a mover, Mayor Collier? Thank you. Mayor Collier will move it, and we will receive this for information. Actually, one more question. What would be the next step?
So through the chair to council, to committee, the next step is staff will be taking your feedback. We will be issuing an RFP for a consultant that will work with us to help navigate this kind of new world for us. And then the next step from that will be to issue an RFP for the actual proposals for the development themselves, based on the feedback here today and other conversations that have happened with senior management prior to.
Okay. All right, and then it comes back. Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Cruciano. So let's move by Mayor Collier. Let's please vote. Thank you, that passes. So we're moving to the next presentation, 7.3, Zoning Our Future Town of Ajax Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw Review, release of the technical reports and draft zoning bylaw amendments. And I'll ask Director Romanowski if you have any opening comments.
Nothing through the chair. I'll turn it over to Sean.
Welcome, Mr. McCullough.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Sean McCullough. I'm the Supervisor of Planning Policy and Research here at the Town of Ajax. And today I'm joined with the Policy Planning team, and we are excited to share Phase 2 of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw Review. This is really a kickoff to re-engage council and the community in this project, and it's been a lot of work to get here, so we're really excited. So this project was initiated in 2015 following the approval of the town's official plan in 2014, and it was branded Zoning Our Future. At the time, we hired WSP as a consultant to help us on certain aspects of this project, but most of the project has been completed by staff. So over the years, this project was delayed just due to a variety of reasons, such as the project team leaving, the constantly changing legislation that we've been chasing, COVID, among many other matters. However, this has been really what my team has been working on for the last year, and it's really a priority for us to complete this before we really get into the next official plan review, which will be starting this year as well. So why are we updating the zoning bylaw? So the Planning Act requires the zoning bylaw to align with the official plan, and this can help introduce as-of-right zoning permissions to really help streamline desirable forms of development. It's also an opportunity for us to resolve issues, review existing standards against best practices, implement legislative changes where required, and address matters from council. So as part of this project, a series of 8 discussion papers were released in 2015, and these were along a series of 8 themes. Consultation was completed in that same year, and a lot of that work has been considered, comments have been considered today. So at this stage, we're now finishing Phase 2 of the project, where we are pleased to release 8 technical reports that discuss issues, provide an assessment of available options, and recommend changes. Following the themes from Phase 1, we have strong neighborhoods, transportation requirements, intensification areas, employment areas, greenland systems, Pickering Village, sustainability elements, and general review and housekeeping. Today, we are also proposing to release a draft of the zoning bylaw itself. Now, this is really helping us condense the project. Originally, we had planned to release the draft after consultation on the technical reports, but this is really helping us bring everything together. So I'm really just going to gloss over some of the changes, but there's a lot, so please bear with me. So the first technical report is Strong Neighborhoods, and this one was completed entirely by staff. Previously, it was referred to as Stable Neighborhoods. The biggest change was at council's direction to permit 4 dwelling units on all properties that have detached, semi-detached, and townhouse dwellings. We're proposing to name them 2 items. There's an attached accessory dwelling unit and a detached accessory dwelling unit. Attached would be a unit within an existing building, and detached would be in something like a detached garage. You would be permitted one of those units in an accessory building, such as in a garage. We're proposing to reduce the parking rates associated with these units, so it would go to 1 parking space per unit. There's also other standards that are being updated as well, just to help achieve some of these units, such as addressing setbacks for below-grade entrances and things like that, where we've seen a lot of variances over the years. We'll also have to implement a minor official plan amendment just to help implement these changes, but that'll be coming forward in the future. We're also proposing to divide the existing country residential zone into two categories, a CRA and CRB zone. And this is really just to address smaller lots that we have down on Ontario Boulevard. We're proposing to align terminology with provincial legislation for things like long-term care facilities as well as retirement homes. There's a variety of changes to standards and permissions for things like accessory buildings and structures, platforms and balconies, as well as home-based businesses. We're also looking to expand what's called an encroachment section, which allows things like air conditioners and barrier-free ramps, as well as ornamental features to be more easily accommodated in required yards. With regards to the transportation report, this was really completed with the help of WSP. So overall, parking rates are generally proposed to be reduced, especially in intensification areas. For non-residential uses, we're also building formulas into the bylaw itself to recognize the sharing of parking, and this will help to utilize parking spaces more efficiently. There will also be new blended rates for certain uses. We're proposing to introduce minimum bicycle parking spaces for both short-term and long-term bicycle parking. There's transportation demand management options. They'll be integrated into the bylaw, so parking space could be reduced slightly if things like carpool parking spaces or car share spaces are provided. And that's, again, a formula that's built into the bylaw. And then we're just updating various standards like drive aisles, drive-through queuing, things of that nature. The intensification report was completed by staff with the help of WSP. So we are looking to update the downtown central area zone as well as the uptown center zones. This is just some minor standards and permitted uses, just updating them to reflect current practices. We're proposing a holding provision in the downtown just to address some of our official plan policies related to air quality studies. We're looking to introduce two new zones, a Midtown Corridor Zone and a GO Station Mixed Use Zone. So these would provide as-of-right zoning permissions in most of these areas with just a couple of exceptions. But there will also be a holding provision in the GO Station just to ensure things like minimum jobs and land use compatibility are considered. Finally, we're also proposing to introduce two new subsections. One is called a pedestrian street classification, and this would apply zone standards related to things like setbacks and built form, as well as ground floor transparency on a street-by-street basis, just to promote consistency and vibrancy. There's also new urban design standards that would apply to new and tall rise buildings, things like tower separations and maximum floor plate, and this just implements our official plan policies. Next up, we've got employment areas, and this again was prepared by staff with the help of the consultant. So changes would remove funeral homes as well as public storage facilities as permitted use in the prestige employment zone. We're also looking to introduce a variety of new uses. We have controlled environment agriculture facility, cannabis production facility, convention center, craft beverage establishment, research and development facility, as well as media production facility. We're also proposing to rezone lands that are zoned heavy employment to general employment, and this would just align with our general employment designation in the official plan. And then there's just a variety of minor updates to things like outdoor storage and introducing new outdoor storage requirements for car dealerships. The Pickering Village report was completed entirely by staff, and it proposes to shift the Pickering Village zones to their own section, as well as introducing a new definition for small-scale mixed-use building to allow smaller mixed-use buildings. The uses are also proposed. Our new uses are also proposed, such as takeout restaurants and craft beverage establishments. We're looking to expand the list of permitted uses in the VC3 zone for things like daycare facilities and restaurants, just to, again, create more vibrancy in the village and create more opportunity. And then there's just minor zone standards and setback requirements that are just proposing to be updated. Greenland system was prepared entirely by staff, and so this proposes to amend the definitions for agricultural operation just to align with provincial legislation. It also introduces new definitions for agricultural related uses as well as on-farm diversified uses. On-farm would just allow small value-added businesses to be located on farms. To implement the official plan, a holding provision is proposed to be applied to some vacant properties to require an environmental impact study where there are environmental features located there. A new erosion hazard zone is proposed along some of the properties near Ontario Boulevard, and this just aligns with CLOCA's erosion hazard limit boundary that recognizes impacts from Lake Ontario. And finally, there's just a number of changes to the environmental protection zone where we've recently seen EIS is completed or there's been land conveyed to the town or the Conservation Authority for their long-term protection. Sustainability technical report was completed by the consultant with the help of staff. Now, there are not many changes with this report as most items will continue to be addressed through the Ajax Green Standard. But some of the changes include new definitions and standards to promote things like community gardens and farmers markets, as well as standards to promote stormwater infiltration. We're also proposing new definitions for things like hard and soft landscaping and green roofs, while updating some of the standards also to just encourage green roofs over time. And then also finally, just updating some of the encroachment section to broaden the permissions for shade structures. Finally, the last report is the general bylaw review and housekeeping amendment. So this really just touches on a variety of new and amended definitions that were not addressed in any of the other technical reports. We're proposing to introduce a new mapping format. So this would combine the two existing sets of mapping that we have and really make it a lot more user-friendly. And then finally, there's also an overview of how a number of council motions have been addressed. So things like payday loan establishments, short-term rentals, vertical farming, as well as updating permitted uses in employment areas. As I mentioned earlier, a draft of the bylaw is also available for review, and we really encourage landowners and stakeholders to review this, because this is where you'll actually see the changes that are being proposed, and some people may find that a little bit easier to understand. Now, given the length of time since the release of the discussion papers, we had to really update our consultation strategy, and that's really why we wanted to be here today. So today, with committee's endorsement, we hope to launch a 3-month consultation period on the technical reports and the draft bylaw. We have a series of open house events planned that I'll go over in a moment. Staff will also be attending a variety of pop-up events like the Ajax Markets and Trail Fest next weekend, just to promote engagement in this project. Now, knowing that there's a lot of information here, staff will be planning to meet with members of council over the next couple of weeks, just so that we can go over the changes with you, answer your questions, and really help you understand what we're proposing here. We also plan to schedule targeted stakeholder meetings with agencies and stakeholders like the development community. So if you're hearing from your constituents, there are a lot of ways that they can get involved. So we encourage you to direct inquiries to staff so that we can listen, record the response, as well as consider their comments. There's also an IMO page where comments can be submitted, as well as an online mapping viewer where comments can be added right to the mapping viewer. They can also submit to the Zoning Our Future at Ajax email address. And then we'll also be planning a statutory meeting in the fall, which I'll also touch on in a moment. So with the open houses, we have 4 open houses planned. There's going to be 1 in each ward, 1 in July, 1 in August, and 1 in September. These ones will be designed as drop-in sessions, so residents can drop in at any time between 6 and 8, and staff will be on hand to have a conversation. And then we'll also be holding a virtual open house meeting, which will be your typical presentation and a Q&A. And that one requires registration in advance. So finally, just with next steps, so after today, we hope to proceed to that 3-month consultation period, meeting with council, community, and stakeholders. So as mentioned, we're also planning a statutory public meeting in the fall where landowners, stakeholders, and whomever can submit written and oral comments to the committee. Staff will provide an overview of what we heard during the consultation, and this would also be an opportunity for council to provide an overview of what you have heard, as well as direction to staff. So no decision would be planned at this meeting. We would take the feedback and we will update, and we hope to come back to you before the end of the year or the early next year, depending on how many comments that we have. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. McCullough. There are a few speakers on the list here. We'll start with Mayor Collier. Go ahead.
Actually, I have a call I have to take. I will pass it on to the next one and get my money.
Okay, Thank you. Councillor Tyler Morin.
I could do that too. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for letting me in, and to you, Mr. McCullough, for this vast presentation. There's so much in here. I think it's really important that the open houses and the opportunity. So I'm wondering, we have them drop dead in the middle of the summer. Then there's one in September. Just a little bit worried about the timing of those. I want to make sure that residents know, and we can work with. So my question is, through you or through the chair to comms, I don't know what kind of coordination or how we can get the word out to residents that this is happening, because there's a lot in here. That maybe that's just a comment / question, but something to consider. Okay, go ahead. I don't even know if there's a question there. Just more of a comment.
Through the chair, yes, we're very aware of the timing associated with this, being that it is a summer and it's a summer recess, but I think we can take advantage of the downtime to do some really targeted work on this, and that was what the plan is. So we intend on getting this all geared up and ready to go, and then do what we can through the summer, but as Mr. McCullough noted, there's some more opportunities in the fall as well.
Right, okay, yeah, and we can communicate that to our residents. I do appreciate the fact that we're going to be having one-on-ones. Could you just quickly, just since we're here, just define small-scale mixed-use building in Pickering Village, just a little bit more? What exactly is that?
So through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin. So really it's, right now our definition of an apartment building is 4 units or more. The challenge we often have in Pickering Village is the individuals that want to retain the building. There's often a requirement for commercial space to be on the ground floor. So it's really an opportunity to allow uses that have 1, 2, 3 units with the ground level commercial, so that there's an opportunity to retain those buildings, but there would still be opportunities for more intensified development in accordance with our official plan and zoning bylaw.
Okay, and then again, on the one-on-ones, we can discuss this more, but just quickly, the fourplexes coupled with reduced parking. Woo, that's pretty much flipped from what we deal with daily, where they want more parking. That's a challenge. That's also a comment. I didn't ask you a question there, did I? We can look at these things deeper. I'm just going to leave it there for now, but that one sticks out. Fourplexes, reduced parking. Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me speak.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. The next speaker, I accidentally removed you, and see you've come back in. Regional Councillor Crawford, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. Is there any way, probably not popular, but is there any way to have a bylaw to limit the amount of dentists in certain areas? No. Literally not? Oh, my next dentist appointment is going to be brutal, but yeah. Why not? Like, why can't you? Discriminate? Oh. Well, no, like, we're not saying you can't be there. It's just like it can't overtake an area. No? Okay, all right, never mind. Okay, so when you went through this whole comprehensive review, what was the one thing that you went, yeesh, that's going to be a problem?
So through you, Madam Chair.
It's a big report, so I'd like you to just say, yeesh, which one is the one that...
And this is a tough one. Like, I think there's always, no matter what we put forward with this type of project, there's always going to be somebody that's not happy.
Oh, yeah, but aside from that, we already know that.
But I think like it's going to be the common ones. We think it's going to be the parking, some of the reductions that we're seeing, but we definitely think it's the reduced parking is aligned with industry best practices, but we will always hear that it's either not enough, and then we will also hear that you're not going low enough. We're going to hear both ends of the spectrum. So I think that one would be a big one that we'll start seeing. Like same with the additional dwelling units. It's going to be things like we're going to hear from people saying, you know, it's still too hard to have 4 units, and there's going to be residents saying there's too many units coming to my neighborhood. So it's really kind of taking all the comments we're hearing from both sides and creating a bylaw that we think really works for everyone and aligns with best practices.
So the HACCP funding, we're required to say yes to fourplex. But if we're required to say it, then why would we reduce the parking? Why wouldn't we say, okay, well, now we got to figure this out?
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, and the council also agreed to a reduction in the parking for things like additional dwelling units. Now, on the surface, I don't think it's as big of an issue as we see. So right now, it's one less parking space when you get to the 4 full units. Right now, the bylaw requires 2 parking spaces for the first primary unit, and then under the current bylaw, it's 1 additional parking space for the second unit, so a total of 3 for 2 units. All this does is it goes to 1-to-1 space for the dwelling units, and I think when you look at
So you get 4 spaces.
exactly, so
Oh,
if
okay.
you have 2 units, you require 2 spaces. If you have 3 units, you require 3, 4, 4. So I think too, when you start looking at these properties and you're adding units into them, you do actually they function a little bit differently. You've got large families in some of these homes take up a lot of parking, but now you start breaking it up into these smaller units and maybe singles, maybe couples that share a car. So there may be less of a need for parking, and it's really something we're starting to see more and more of, I think. And I think Ajax is just getting there.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Councillor Henry. Go ahead.
Thank you. I look forward to our meeting. I have many questions. I'm not going to ask them today because we'll be here for a long time. With regards to the open houses, can we ask whether it's through your office, coordination with our office, that this go in our council calendar so that we as council are aware of when these are taking place and have the option and an opportunity to attend should we want to, instead of waiting for the staff report to come before us? That's a reasonable ask through the chair.
Yep. Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Henry, so that's a step we've already taken. We've planned these open houses to make sure that all council members are available on these dates based on your calendar currently. And it's been added to the council calendar, so we'll ensure that it's there for you, and we hope to see you.
Excellent. I hadn't seen it there, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. Councillor Lee and I put forth a parking study motion a while back in 2022 that is not in the budget as of yet. Will this tie into that somehow? Because when we're talking about taking away parking in certain areas, shouldn't we have a parking study before we start doing that?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, so certainly when we look at parking, it is a comprehensive strategy, and that parking study, I would assume, has to consider this, whether it's on-street parking, whether it's permitted parking, whether it's opportunities off-site, it all kind of looks together. So the rates will be considered through that study and see what strategies are needed to help mitigate parking impacts.
Yes, but the study's not in the budget. So if the study's not happening, how do we get that information? Will this project be putting the study now into the budget?
Through the chair, no, I wouldn't add the project. The rates that we're putting forward are based on industry best practices and what we're seeing come through the door on a regular basis. And it will take time. It's not going to be overnight that these lower parking rates, you're going to start seeing the impacts. This is going to take place over decades. So there certainly would be time once that parking strategy is examined that it starts looking at what options are available to the town.
Well, I guess that's what I'm asking. Are we putting the cart before the horse here without having the parking study done first?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, I don't believe we are. And I think that the parking study would really supplement any work going forward.
It's a supplement.
And if I may,
Okay.
through the chair to Councillor Henry, I think what that parking study is looking at is like town need for parking on roads or in, like as we were talking about in the previous item, like a public parking facility on town land. The zoning is talking about parking on private property, not parking for the town.
Got
Where
it.
a master parking study would look at that town need for parking on public facilities as opposed to the zoning bylaw, which is governing and regulating parking on private property.
Not on town roads.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you. And one last thing, I heard you say something about short-term rental. Is there a change to that?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, so we'll go over all this with you as well, but right now there's a minor change to the definition. So that would be, because right now we don't call it short-term rental, we call them bed and breakfast establishments. So it would be a minor change where the owner must reside in the in the dwelling. So that's the minor change, and we've been working closely with bylaw services to make sure that the bylaws that they have in place continue to manage kind of the concerns related to short-term rentals.
Very interesting to have that conversation with you. I'll bring tea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. And the next person is Regional Councillor Dyes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question I didn't quite understand about adding new bicycle parking rates for short and long-term parking requirements. Is this something the development industry is moving towards?
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes, yes. So most developments that we see coming through the door now require or add bicycle parking spaces to their buildings, whether it's in the underground parking or elsewhere. So this would start be moving to the direction to implement minimum bicycle parking spaces. Short term would be inside, or sorry, long term would be in the building. Short term is outside. And when we do start talking about things like reducing parking, they're all kind of related because more bicycle parking to help reduce some of those parking rates over time is definitely desirable.
Is that because they're providing locked spaces for those, which take up more room for those bicycles?
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes, that's correct. It could be long-term would be secured. So in some developments, it might be a room with double stacked parking spaces, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Director McClarty, did you have a comment to make?
Thank you. Through the chair, my staff wanted me to remind council that items like the fourplexes and the parking minimums are very important for the HAF funding in order for us to maintain that. So keep that in mind too when you're having your discussions with Mr. McCullough around those questions.
Thank you. Great questions. Thanks for the presentation. So I just had a question myself for about the 4 dwelling units or attached the accessory dwelling units. So currently, if someone wants to do this, they have to go to Committee of Adjustment? And will this change mean that they don't have to do that anymore?
So to you, Madam Chair. So right now, by provincial legislation, we're required to permit up to 3 units on a property. This change would move that to 4 units per property. There may still be situations where a homeowner may need to go to Committee of Adjustment for minor things, like a setback for the below grade entrance. We think we've addressed that, and this will reduce most of them, but there still may be one-off situations where there's other development standards that may need to go to committee, but generally this should help get those units faster without going through that process.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? I see Mayor Collier is not back yet. So if there are no other questions, there is a report that has recommendations. There are 5 of them altogether, so I guess our motion would be to approve the recommendations in the report and thank Mr. McCullough for the presentation. Thank you. May I please have a mover for the report? Regional Councillor Lee. Let's vote, please. He always does. Oh, sorry.
Are we done?
We're done. So that passes. Let's see what's next. Hold on. Next is 7.4, the Waterfront Final Environmental Study Report. Director Romanowski, did you have any opening comments?
No opening comments. I'll turn it over to Mr. Ruddy.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Ruddy. The mayor has come and asked for us to be generous with our time and allow him, since it just completed, to ask how many questions do you have? To ask 2 questions. Jason, we're fine to do that without anything other than our approval to go ahead, correct? Our gracious acceptance of accommodation to the mayor and Mr. McCullough.
You are the chair.
I'm the chair, so take it away. Thank you. 2 questions.
Okay, thank you. Just very quickly, and I'm sorry, I'll share, that was an important call. My apologies. For the employment areas, you mentioned removal of funeral homes and self-storage, but you didn't mention gas stations. We had a motion moved by this council that we withdrew so it could go through this process instead.
So through the chair to you, Mr. Mayor. So we have to comply with the official plan. So there are aspects that we can deal with now. So public storage facilities and funeral homes are specifically already not permitted in the prestige employment designation. So this would deal with that here. And then in the official plan review, that's an opportunity for us to look at those elements, and we were going to build it into that.
Okay, thank you. So we'll call that phase 2.
Mr. Mayor, your microphone is now active.
Okay, thank you very much. And secondly, the Greenland system, and you're talking about putting an H holding provision in place to require an environmental impact study in some cases when it's within X amount of distance from an environmental feature, which is fine, but for these lands in the Greenbelt that you can't build on anyway, why would you need an environmental impact statement?
So through you, Madam Chair, to the Mayor, so there are vacant properties where they still may be able to have one detached dwelling. So in those, we have had situations where it's looking at the environmental features and just delineating where that can go. So it would just be dealing with that. And then, of course, once OPA 71 is resolved, staff have delegated authority for the holding of provisions so that we're able to remove that once that has been satisfied.
Okay, so is that only in cases where it's like legal non-conforming?
It wouldn't, in some cases, yes, where it's legal non-conforming, but there are still where you can have one. If the lot existed before a certain date and it's still vacant currently, they are sometimes able to have one detached dwelling. They can construct it. There's very few, but there is still that opportunity in some instances.
Even inside the Greenbelt?
Yep.
Wow, it's good to know.
It's just a land division that's not permitted.
And to the vertical farming, personally, I don't want to see it in employment zones. We've got so much Greenbelt space. I would love to see it more, and it can be done in the Greenbelt, right? Vertical farming, indoor growing?
Yep. So
Okay.
yeah, greenhouses are still permitted in the Greenbelt area.
So what changes, if any, have been made to kind of incentivize that? Because again, like this, and I'm not speaking against it, but the Barrett farm over at Harwood and Roslyn, northeast corner, is a couple of hectare, pretty expensive piece of real estate to be putting an urban farm in when we are surrounded by, on the north and east sides, Greenbelt land. Hundreds, if not thousands of acres where that could go. I understand it wouldn't be urban because it's on the wrong side of the street, but given our housing crisis, that land has a pretty high use or high value. How can we incentivize more vertical farming that in our Greenbelts? I mean, we need to be allowing processing type uses and those types of things as well that work with the vertical and the indoor farming.
So through the chair to Mayor Collier. So in our instance, we are permitting it in the employment areas. And the challenge we see in the more rural areas is just the availability of the water connections and electricity. That's been a deterrent, but certainly greenhouses continue to be permitted. So there are some properties where if they are abutting an existing water main, they can connect to it. So those would still be permitted. So really it's kind of permitted now. But by allowing them in employment areas, we feel that, you know, there are opportunities for smaller scale companies that may be just starting off. They might be able to get into an existing building that has the water, that has the electricity, get off the ground running, and then maybe we can elevate them into a greenhouse elsewhere.
But in our case, like east of Audley and north of Taunton, all the infrastructure is on the west side of Audley and the south side of Taunton. Like, it's there. It's just a matter of crossing the roads. So, I mean, currently on these Greenbelt lands, we're collecting for farming 25% of what the taxes would be, versus if we were to be able to use these for indoor growing, more employment, I guess, would it still qualify as farming tax-wise?
So through the chair, I would have to look into that
Like,
further.
I'm concerned that we move these into prestige employment, and now we're losing 75% of our taxes because now they're classified as farms.
It would be still classified as like an industrial use. It's no different than any other. It would continue to be processed, I would think, in the same category
Okay,
in
so
an
if vertical
employment area.
farming moves to prestige employment, it's still going to be taxed as employment, not as farming.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to rely on MPAC to assess that as the tax class.
That's
Sorry.
significant. That's a 75% reduction, potentially. Which is, again, why I would like to see it outside of our urban boundary as a permitted use. So just to change gears on this, is there anything in this new document, in this new zoning bylaw review, that is going to restrict from what we have today in the greenbelt lands for vertical or indoor farming?
No, nothing beyond what we have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your lenience, Chair. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll ask Mr. Ruddy to come back, please. Thank you so much for your patience. And we are looking at item 7.4, TRCA Waterfront Final Environmental Study Report. Please take it away when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am here today with TRCA, who are going to run us through the presentation quickly.
Hi, Natasha. I believe you're online. If you can hit the button that looks like a head with a couple of lines emanating away from it. Okay. And now you should have the ability to share your screen as well if you would like to share the slide deck.
Perfect. I will.
Oh. Should be able to share now.
I'll just share this window.
Oh, I think that's you've shared your web browser, I believe.
Oh, that's unfortunate. 1 second, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm not seeing the option to share my my presentation itself. But let me try this entire screen. And maybe this will work.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Got it.
All right. Amazing. Hello, everybody. My name is Natasha Gibson. I'm from Toronto Region Conservation Authority, and I'm going to be sharing just a brief update on the results of our erosion mitigation project, including the final recommendations for our environmental study report. So I just wanted to start by just showing a map of the shoreline and how it has been broken down for the purposes of this report. Because the shoreline is so large, we did break it down into 12 reaches. And the idea is that we're presenting a single recommendation for each of these 12 reaches. Through the analysis, we were able to determine average erosion rates based on historical and predicted future erosion rates along the shoreline, which helped us divide it into a higher priority and lower priority areas. From this map, you can see the items in red, which are Reach 3 and Reach 5, are identified as action required. We anticipate the report recommends implementation within the next 10 years for those two reaches. And the remaining reaches in blue are identified as no immediate action, where the recommended implementation is beyond 10 years, in some places 40 years, and in some places no implementation of shoreline infrastructure recommended at all. So I wanted to go through our final conceptual design options that we have for the shoreline. There's 3 different options that we're looking at that are going to be applied to each reach, and these have all been revised and refined based on public consultation. So our first option is an offshore breakwater with gaps. This is unchanged since the last council presentation that we had done previously and has remained unchanged throughout this process. It's a hardened shoreline structure that's set off from the proper shoreline, which means the shoreline itself can still continue to be used recreationally in the same function that it is now. And I will go over in a couple of slides which of these options is recommended where along the shoreline. Our next option went through a little bit of change based on the feedback that we got. What we heard through our public consultation was that there was a desire for less robust measures, less intensively engineered measures where possible. And we realized through that consultation there's an opportunity to do this with the Cobble Boulder Beach option. On the slide, there's a couple of photos. The photo on the left shows existing conditions as of 2021 at Veterans Point. And the photo on the right shows an engineered beach within the Toronto city limits that TRCA retained an engineer to develop. So the one on the left is a natural accumulation of stone. The one on the right is engineered. And what we envision with this option is a spectrum option, where in some areas we may have larger stone like on the left or smaller stone like on the right. And in other areas, it may be more engineered, like the image on the right, where we can kind of see a more defined slope, and the stone size is similarly sized or within a certain spec. And sometimes we may see more of a naturalized approach that really focuses on erosion protection as well as improved aquatic habitat. So through this option, we would expect to see a more engineered, larger stone beach option in areas where there's higher erosion or there's more critical infrastructure at risk, and a less engineered option with some smaller stone, more on the cobble side that we see on the right in areas where there's less risk. And our last option, which is really interesting and helped us really change our concept designs based on public feedback, is our shoreline erosion monitoring option. This is essentially an upgrade to the do nothing option of an environmental assessment, which means that we're not promoting or not recommending any hardened shoreline solution in this area. But what we are recommending is a more comprehensive shoreline erosion monitoring program. And what I've shown in these images here on the left, as part of the study earlier in 2021, TRCA was actually able to fly remote drone technology along the shoreline and pick up elevation data, including the top of the shoreline crest. And we would be able to continuously monitor that and get real-time updates on those recession rates. So we can, the town can react proactively instead of just reactively to any changes in erosion rates. We'll also pair that with on-the-ground monitoring, where staff will actually go out and physically measure on the ground distances to paths or benches, etc. So just so the town is aware of how things are changing on site. And what this does is it allows us in lower risk areas where we don't anticipate to implement in 20 years or beyond. By keeping a closer eye on that, we're able to stretch out that potential implementation date to 40 years or more, or even omit that shoreline hardening recommendation entirely. So this has been really a really great concept to explore and has really helped us reduce our shoreline hardening along the shoreline. And then I just want to give a high-level overview of the report recommendations based on all of that. So this is a map of the shoreline. It doesn't have the reaches labeled on this map, unfortunately, but it does show what the current environmental study report recommendations are for along the shoreline. In green, we have shoreline monitoring. That's our option with on-the-ground or remote data collection, but no actual implementation, no placing stones, no construction. We have an offshore breakwater in 2 of the areas, one higher priority area beside Rotary Park. And then we have the Cobble and Boulder Beach option, and that's kind of the longest stretch along the shoreline where we're actually proposing implementation. But as I said earlier, we really envision this as being a spectrum approach where some places may have very minimal rock placement and some places will be more robust and more engineered, and that will be determined based on detailed design. And then I just wanted to touch on very briefly, it would be the more fleshed out in the environmental study report itself, but these are some of the evaluation criteria that we used in our technical committees and community events to help to rank all of those recommended options. And this is kind of the information that fed into helping us get to those recommendations. So environmental, physical, cultural, cost, and technical aspects. And then there's just a couple of highlights from each of the sections, but the actual evaluation sheets are far more detailed with a lot more items than just listed here. And then I just wanted again to keep this very brief and just kind of end off with what some of our projected next steps are going to be before moving into potential questions. So here's our timeline. We're currently closer to the right-hand side of the timeline now than the left-hand side, which is great with this council meeting. Some of our next steps will be moving towards a public review of this report and the recommendations with a 30-day timeline for that. And as long as that proceeds well, we'd be looking at potential ministry approval of this environmental study report going into the fall of this year, and that will end off this phase of the project. At this point, there's no dedicated funding for any future detailed designs or future implementation, but that will be some of the next steps following this. Once this environmental study report is approved, those would be some of the next steps. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gibson. Very interesting presentation. I don't see any names on our speakers list. Are there any questions about the presentation or the report? I see Regional Councillor Crawford. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. This seems expensive. Who's paying for it?
So through the chair, there's no funding confirmed at this point. Steve, if you would like to take that answer, please feel free to.
Yeah, through the chair, as Natasha said, there is no funding earmarked for any of this yet. We're actively working with whomever's available out there. I think we've made a little bit of progress with Environment and Climate Change Canada on putting together an application for some of it, but we have nothing to report back on that as of yet, and none of this is in the budget or forecast.
I recall actually attending one of the meetings down, I can't remember where we were, but the dollar figures sent me into a panic, into panic mode. So yeah, so I really hope there's another body of government that can help out with that. Anyway, thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Dyes, you're next.
Sorry. Oh, my fault.
Oh, you're good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Natasha. And I do believe that in a lot of instances, there are municipalities that get funding with TRCA and other maybe levels of government to offset the costs of these kind of projects. Is that correct?
Yes, so through the chair, right now we're currently exploring, as Stephen had mentioned, through Environment and Climate Change Canada to look for funding for our Reach 5 site in particular. We think it's a really good candidate. Still in initial discussions right now, but definitely we have a grants team that's always on the lookout for opportunities to collect more funding. There's the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund that TRCA has had success with in the past as well. So there's lots of opportunities to come up. Some of them do rely on municipal contributions as well, but it's definitely something that we're keeping an eye out for and helping us to plan for some next steps to take advantage of opportunities as they come up.
Thank you. And I just wanted to ask you a question too about the rock hooking or the stone hooking, which is really very interesting. I learned about that years ago, but it does have an impact on, I would think, on breaking those waves or slowing that process down. And it would also help, I would assume, with more habitat that we need, more of a choice in habitat. I shouldn't say choice, but we're missing that part on our near shore. And we also have an issue, of course, with the heat. I understand there's a lot of complicated issues there. Has it been considered to ever bring those large boulders back and putting them along the shoreline to help with the wave action? Because, I mean, with every intense storm, we have huge waves.
So through the chair, that's an excellent question, an excellent point, and that's the intention of what the Cobble Boulder Beach will mimic is some of that, the idea that Previously, when you would see the shoreline start to erode, large boulders or cobbles would fall down onto the shoreline and help protect it. With some of those missing, we just see that erosion phase. We don't see the accumulation of the boulders, except in the one photo that I showed in my presentation. That's actually at a headland area. So that's an area that is being protected. It's not actively eroding because those boulders happen to have stayed there for whatever reason they weren't removed. So the cobble boulder beach is intended to mimic that, as if the stone hooking hadn't continued to happen. We're going to put that stone back, and there's a lot of aquatic habitat benefits to that over just pure sand as well.
Thank you. And I noticed in, I think it was Reach 5, the red area, that it was in an area on the waterfront that was particularly narrow and closer to residential. Is that why that was also chosen as problematic?
Yes, through the chair, exactly. That's correct. It's Reach 3 and Reach 5 were both considered high priority. Reach 3 because its proximity to Rotary Park Pavilion and the difficulties with moving that, obviously, as being a full structure there. And Reach 5 is that narrowed area and the parking infrastructure further up. There's aggressive erosion happening in that area because of the near vertical bluffs and the sand. Presence of sand and lack of cobbles and boulders. And so we're seeing increased erosion there and not as much space to just let it erode over time.
Thank you. So yeah, I really appreciate the report. I do support it. I think that it's critical. This is not, there's no ward boundaries here when it comes to the waterfront or the Pickering Village or places like that. I think the waterfront's very important. It's part of our community culture. Our residents use it constantly. It's a busy place. And I think we need to protect those homes that are, if we don't start now, things can happen very rapidly, as we saw with the loss of our trails in 2017. There's all of these issues. So I think it's really, really important that we move forward with it sooner than later before it becomes really a very tragic sort of story. So thank you very much for the work you've done on this.
Thank you, Councillor Dyes. And next we have Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Crawford alluded, her and I went to see the presentation down in South Ajax, one of the schools, and the cost made me leave there almost in tears to know what was coming. So we're going to take this today, we're going to receive this report for information. You're going to go out looking for money to fund this. What happens if you don't get the money to fund this? What's next steps? What comes next? Through the chair.
So, through the chair to Councillor Henry. The next, there's not really much that we can do if we don't have the funding for it. So we'll just continue on our search for funding. The EA recommendations give us 10 years in terms of recommended for the higher priority sites to be done within 10 years, and that's only 2 sites out of the 12. The rest, there's up to 40 years or beyond, or no recommended implementation. So I would say the costs anticipated are very different than those that were communicated during that first public event, especially with the longest stretch being the Cobble Boulder Beach. We really have the ability to play with that a little bit more. Maybe Reach 5 is a kilometer long. Maybe we only implement 300 meters or so, to the extent that we have budget available and based on the highest priority areas. So there's some flexibility with what we can do with the funding that we have. But ideally, we look towards pursuing funding, especially for those higher reach areas, Reach 3 and Reach 5, within the timelines recommended in the environmental study report.
And the places you go for the funding, your sources that are available are federal level and provincial as well, or just federal?
Through the chair, right now we're looking at just federal funding right now, as well as municipal, not provincial at this point that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? So thanks again, Ms. Gibson. So I did have a question. So about these refined concepts, so compared to what was being recommended prior to consultation, in particular maybe with those high priority reaches, And again, it goes down to cost. So has a lot of the recommendations been changed? And also, do you expect that with these refined concepts, it might actually end up costing less or have an impact on cost? Hopefully.
Yes, I think that is very true. The original concepts that we proposed relied heavily on a shoreline revetment, which there's not really opportunity to make a revetment more robust or less robust. It kind of just is a very robust structure on its own. And that was one of the higher cost options where there wasn't really flexibility in the cost itself. So we opted to remove that revetment option, partially because of cost, because that was a concern that was raised as well, but also just from an environmental and ease of implementation perspective as well, because Ajax has that nice buffer from the shoreline before we hit critical infrastructure in a lot of areas. We were able to, instead of proposing a revetment, that we would do that Cobble Boulder Beach option instead and really keep the more intensive solution really relegated just to the key areas where it needs to be. And maybe that's just half a reach or a quarter of a reach, kind of. We'll see when we get to detailed designs. And that reduces the number of reaches that need work and also reduces the amount of material in some cases if it's on the less aggressive erosion areas along the reach. So it certainly did go a long way to reducing the cost, especially because we were able to omit 2 reaches entirely from proposed implementation. So that already took 1/6 of the shoreline away from proposed implementation. So it's definitely something we're mindful of, and these new solutions are in that direction of reduced costs as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, the report the recommendation is that council endorse this report titled TRCA Waterfront Final Environmental Study Report. May I please have a mover? Regional Councillor Dyes. Go ahead and vote. Yes, you should. And that passes. Thank you very much, everybody. So, okay, let's move to the final part, the adjournment. Motion to adjourn. Regional Councillor Crawford, please vote.
Great job, Chair. Good job. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, everyone. And we're done. Hurry, I have to go make a call.